Hey, welcome to the conclusion of our study called Steadfast Love. And we're in Genesis chapter 25. We've been looking at the first half of the story of the servant trying to find Isaac's wife. And as we're looking through this story, are you starting to see the lessons coming out of the story? Are you starting to see how this might apply to your own life? You know, Abraham was an old man, advanced in years, right? Yet his faith in God was really at its peak. I mean, he is saying, well, you go and it's going to happen. So the angel of the Lord is with us. God is with me. So just go, do it. That's what he tells the servant. You know, so many men and women, when their bodies begin to grow weak, their faith grows weak as well. You know, they begin to, their faith just kind of drops off. Like their faith, their relationship with other believers in Christ, you know, begins to wane. It's not a priority anymore. Church life is not really that important anymore. You know, everything else, you know, themselves become their importance. You know, they kind of retire from church. Well, now it's time to let the younger generation come up. But we don't see that anywhere in Scripture, right? That thought where we have to kind of, as we get older, we kind of have to take our step back so that the young people can come up. No. You see that the older people were leading and directing and driving things forward all along until they died. And then the young generation took their place. So that the next generation is older. You know, we got into our minds where like, you know, guys who are like 18, 19-year-old should be pastors. It's like, that's because the older men aren't leading anymore. Why is there that gap there? It's because the older men have checked out. That's why we have younger men in leadership. You know? And even having younger men in leadership roles, but the older men should be over them. So when there isn't, that means that the older men have kind of left. They've checked out. They said, well, I'm older now. You know, I don't have as much energy, but that the Bible doesn't give us a way out of that, you know? Abraham is a perfect example. I mean, he's going strong until he dies. And all the other men too, the men of the faith, they're going full bore until they're dead. So you see that in the past too. Pastors in the past, I mean, George Whitefield, that dude was preaching, he preached the day he died. Basically. Well, at least he died the next day. But, you know, within 24 hours, he had preached his last sermon and then died. I mean, this dude needed to be propped up, basically, because he was so weak. But yet there he is, preaching to people. I mean, that's where hopefully where our heart is. That's where we want to be. You know, we want to be driving straight ahead until we get to the end. But so many people, when their bodies begin to grow older, they get weaker. They have, you know, medical issues. They just think, well, God's kind of done with me. And so, you know, we kind of get this pity party kind of thing, or we just think, well, you know, I'm too old. I can't put up the fight anymore. But that's when you need to fight the most. That's when we need men that are standing strong. We need women who are still leading and teaching other women when they're older, especially when they're older. We have far too many examples of people just checking out in the household of God. Abraham has a task before him to serve God by finding the right woman for Isaac so that the promise would continue. Instead of looking at the long journey back to Mesopotamia and throwing up his hands and, you know, because he couldn't make the journey himself, you know, he sets his servant to the task. He encourages and instructs the servant and then sends him forth. Abraham passes on the faith that he has to his servant and commands the servant to walk by faith. You don't see Abraham checking out here. He's not taking a back seat. He's not saying, well, I'm too old now, I'll just let you figure it out. Or I'm too old now, so I'll just kind of take a step back. He's still in the driver's seat. But what does he do? He doesn't say, well, my time has passed. Now it's time for the younger people. I'll just sit over here and I'll go sit over here quietly and watch from the sidelines. Go ahead, Isaac, go find your own wife. He doesn't say that. You don't see that mentality anywhere in Scripture from God's people, really. Those advanced in years continue to advance the gospel, continue to lead, continue to encourage. They're the generals in the war that command those who are in the fray, right? They might be on the front lines, but they're the generals. They're leading. They're saying, okay, you go here, you do this. Yeah, you want to do that? Okay. Well, here's how we do this, and they're using their wisdom and instruction and their faith in God that is hopefully keeps growing until they die. Their trust and their disregard for the cares of this world and people pleasing and all that should be gone. And now they're like, yes, here, you go do this. What? That seems a little people pleasing. Let me give you the strength. Let me give you the fortitude that I have and show you how to do this. Let me tell you how to do this. I might not have the energy to do this anymore, but I'm going to instruct you, guide you, form this, put you in the right place so that you can do what you need to do to serve God. That's what we need. So that's a call to you older people, older generation. Don't take a backseat. Don't do it. Don't do it. Even if you become where you're homebound, even if you're a shut-in, you can still do this. I mean, especially today, there's really no excuse. Unless you're physically, unless you get to the point where you cannot write, you cannot talk, you cannot pray, if your mind is not working anymore, I mean, that's really the only way out. But if you still have those faculties and you just physically can't get out, it doesn't mean you give up, right? It doesn't mean that you just shut yourself in. You might be shut in because you can't leave your home. But it doesn't mean that you can encourage people. It doesn't mean that you can't reach out to people and say, hey, I'm with you. Why don't you come over to my house and I'll tell you what's going on. I don't want to get to the place where I'm like, well, I got this disease or I got this, physical ailment, or I'm too weak to get out. Maybe I'm bedridden. I don't want to get to the place where even if I'm bedridden, if I still have my mind, I still want to be helping other people. I don't want to give up. And I think that's what Satan wants us to do. Oh, you're old now. Give up. So I encourage you. Don't do that, please. For the rest of us who are younger, don't do that. Must also grapple with the providence of God here. Some people don't like the idea. I don't get that. Providence is great. Let me read you something that Ruth Bryan, a woman who lived during the 1800s, early 1800s. I think she died around 1860. But here's what she wrote. She said, deliverance seldom comes in the way we look for it. For who has directed the Spirit of the Lord? Who gave him his counsel? Who did he consult with? Who gave him understanding and taught him the paths of justice? Who taught him knowledge and showed him the way of understanding? That's Isaiah 40, 13 through 14. Has not the Lord frustrated our purposes over and over again? I cannot tell you with what majesty this passage has often come to my mind. Who gave him his counsel? Not puny sinful worms. He will counsel for them, but not with them. My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Yet fear not, worm Jacob, I will help you to stand still and see my salvation, or help you to walk in the dark, in a rough and unknown path, just as my wisdom sees fit. Spiritual eyesight is not given to look at the outward path, but to look at our guide, not to look before us at the way we're going to travel, but to look only at him who will guide us safely through all, who will himself be our way. Oh, to be kept abiding in him and to constantly looking unto him. It is most safe and blessed, but very contrary to flesh and blood. I will lead the blind by a way they did not know. I will guide them in paths they have not known. I will turn darkness to light in front of them and rough places into level ground. This is what I will do for them, and I will not forsake them. Isaiah 42:16. That's good stuff, right? So brothers and sisters, God is on the throne. He is in control. of everything. As Spurgeon said, even the aphid on the rosebud. If he can guide a humble servant to a woman he chose 450 miles away, he can also lead you to your home with him in heaven. He can do that. This is the God of the Bible. His name is Providence. Are you in need? Do you have a trial that is burdening you? Are you losing your grip here? Trust in his providence. Trust in his steadfast love and his faithfulness. Hear these words from Charles Spurgeon. Think about this. The best remedy for affliction is sweet submission to God's providence. What can't be cured must be endured. Well, join us next time, and we will look at the next part, the second half of the story of the servant looking for the wife of Isaac.